Hiya, today I'm going to be doing a video response to Simon from At the Hermit's Cave. Now Simon did a hashtag about a month or so ago called my tarot journey through decks, and there are 4 prompts for this video: beginning, deepening, now and milestone. So the first 3 I need to be in order, but the milestone can come anywhere within the video. I haven't done a video response before, so it'll be interesting to see how this pans out. So thank you in advance for joining me and to hear my tarot story. Now you may be looking at the spread of items I have here and think, what on earth is going on here? But it's all relevant as to how tarot came into my life. So the first deck that I became aware of was the Rider-Waite-Smith, but this was really an indirect influence, and it was a good couple of years before I actually got a copy of the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and this is the Pocket Universal Edition. Now, the reason it's indirect is because at the time I was working on some cat characters called the Tremendous Tuxedo Circus, and this has evolved within those 5 years as has my tarot practice has grown. So initially I was creating some tarot cards for Misty The Fortune Teller, and this book is quite recent, but these started out as digital downloads, and as you can see, I'd sort of researched these cards and I didn't know anything about them, and I simply went through the major arcana, very heavily inspired by the Rider-Waite-Smith, and I did this purely on a visual approach, and it wasn't until I decided that I wanted to pop these onto my Instagram that I actually started to research the meaning of the cards. So these are actually some of the original drawings I did. As you can see, they were digitized and made a lot bigger, and I really struggled with some of them, so the Wheel of Fortune and the Death card, and I've actually still got the original printouts that I did to help me do these drawings. So yeah, from this point I looked at the meanings of the cards and I became absolutely fascinated by them. And I thought that actually, yeah, I'd really like to get into the tarot and find out more, just because, yeah, the meanings, just something about it just really resonated with me. I will say, and I think Simon mentioned this in his video, I'm not a great fan of the art. I've grown to appreciate the art of the Rider-Waite-Smith deck the more I know about it, but it's not a style that necessarily draws me in. And so my first actual deck that I received, the Tarot of Pagan Cats Tarot. Now you might be thinking, why cats? And I've been thinking about this a lot. I think because I was working with the cat theme anyway, and I do love cats, I'm not going to lie, and also I think, and Simon also mentioned this on his video, that there is still a bit of a taboo about tarot, and there's still a lot of people out there that think it's evil, and I suppose part of me was a little bit wary still of kind of going down this route, and I guess with the cats it just made it kind of like a soft introduction to tarot, if you like, and so yeah, this is the first deck that I got, and I absolutely love it. The cats are absolutely delightful in this, and I think for me it was a really good introduction to the tarot. And kind of sticking with this deck, I realised much later on, once I'd got my copy of Rider-Waite-Smith, that actually this deck, even though it's cats, is very, very true to the essence and the imagery on the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and I do have a video which goes through some of the similarities. And the other thing about this deck is it kind of helped with a bit of a tarot milestone, and this was the first deck that I did a full review on. So I did a general overview of the decks that I had in my collection, and then this one I took the plunge and decided to do my first YouTube review. And I think after doing that I realised that in fact I really enjoy doing these reviews. I enjoy talking about the cards and my experiences with them, but also just looking at the artwork and being an artist. I just love the different types of art that you get for tarot cards, and I think that's another big draw for me into the tarot, looking at how people have interpreted these fascinating kind of archetypes and meanings. So I've been thinking a lot about how kind of the nature of how tarot came into my life and the timing of it. So it did come to me just really by random chance, and the timing of it was during a phase of my life where I was really going through a bit of a transition, and part of that transition was losing my father. And so he died at the end of 2018, and then at the beginning of 2019 I started to work on the Tremendous Tuxedo Circus, which is ultimately how I discovered tarot. Now, I should mention prior to that, I was already going on this spiritual journey, and that really evolved out of another big life change, which was leaving teaching in 2016. And so I've sort of been slowly moving towards this, I guess, more spiritual life, and sort of becoming interested in paganism and folklore and the Wheel of the Year and the Sabbats. But after losing my father, I just felt like I couldn't do the artwork that I was doing. So I was making these kind of goddessy elemental being dolls, and I didn't even make the connection that they were pagan. It wasn't until my mum looked at them and she was like, oh, they're really quite pagan, and I'd actually been inspired by something completely different, which was tribal fusion belly dance costumes. Anyway, after my dad died, I don't know, I just wanted to create, but I don't know, I guess the pagan dolls were maybe a bit too shadowy, and I think the cats was something I could cope with, and because they were inspired by my own cat, it was just this friendly, you know, let's make some funny whimsical characters. And so I started making these dolls, one of which is Misty, who I introduced to you earlier, and that's how the tarot came into my life. So it was through discovering that character. And so cut to like a year later, and as we know, 2020 was a change for all of us. And after leaving teaching, I was out of paid employment, and I was sort of working on these dolls and artwork and ideas. But at the beginning of 2020, I actually got my first job in a couple of years, which was to work in a care home with elderly people with dementia. And it was literally 3 weeks before the pandemic and lockdown. And I don't know, the irony is where I'd sort of had this time out to do creative work, I suddenly found myself in this situation as a key worker, still employed, still going to work in this very challenging environment. When obviously everybody else had been furloughed, and and it was just a very strange time. Obviously it's a very strange time for everybody, but it was very strange for me because it was a complete contrast to sort of what I've been doing up until that point. And as I said, it was quite a challenging environment because we were working with vulnerable people who didn't really understand what was going on, and then obviously knowing the frustrations of families not being able to visit their loved ones. And I think after about a year of being in that environment, the sort of feelings of stress and overwhelm were starting to kick in, and that's when I started really turning to the cat cards for guidance. And I think it was at that point that I realised that tarot was going to be quite a useful tool in terms of personal development and just trying to work out those sort of nuanced feelings that you sort of feel but you're not quite sure how to label. And so I remember using the cards to sort of check in with my gut feelings about the situation, and at that point I realised that actually there was really something in it and that the cards really don't lie. So, and I sort of I wasn't religious with my tarot practice at that point. I think I was still learning, and I was still in that mindset that, you know, just trying to learn it all and then getting frustrated with myself that I couldn't remember the meanings and, you know, all that stuff that new people I think go through when they first discover tarot. But I knew something. But I knew that this is something that I wanted in my life, and that I was going to persevere with, and I wasn't going to give up with. So after buying my initial tarot deck, the Tarot of Pagan Cats, I kind of was absolutely hooked and obsessed, and I still am. And so I went on a bit of a rapid deck collecting rampage, if you like, and just to get as many decks as possible. I did sort of use the excuse that it was research. So something I forgot to mention earlier with the colouring pages that I did, that a little bit down the line I decided that I was going to design a deck based on those characters, and really it started out as an opportunity for me to explore the meanings and to help me learn the meanings a little bit deeper. And so in my head I was thinking, well, if I get all these other decks, then it's research and I can see how other people have done it. In terms of deepening my practice, I think it took me a couple of years to feel just sort of confidence in myself with what I was doing. And I think you know, you see these people out there and they're so knowledgeable about the cards, and you think, oh god, I wish I could be like that, and then you do it and you look at the card and you get nothing, and then you're fumbling to find out the meanings of the cards, and it's a very I think up and down process. And I think in terms of deepening my practice, this deck really helped me, which is Phantomwise Tarot by Erin Morgenstern, the author of The Night Circus. And the reason this deck helped me to deepen my practice, I think, is because it's the first deck that I felt like I connected with on a intuitive level. And I've talked about this deck before. It is quite a simple deck, but I think that's where its power lies. And so if you're new to tarot and you want to maybe have the confidence to be intuitive, so just looking at the cards and just knowing what that card means for you, then I think this is a perfect deck for that. And I think I've said in the past that when I first looked at the images, when I finally got the deck, I did think, oh, I'm not actually sure I'm going to get anything from these. And this deck has delivered time and time again. And I think this is definitely my go-to deck for intuitive readings. And I quite like this deck because there is a slight shadowiness to it as well. And so if you're willing to delve into your shadowy side. I should say I'm Moon in Scorpio, so I think I'm naturally drawn to shadowy things anyway. Yeah, this deck has been perfect for that, and I always get value from the readings. Well, I do with all of my decks, but I don't know, I think because I had this quite early on bond with this deck on an intuitive level, I do have a real soft spot for this deck. I love this card. I've got an obsession with stripy tights and socks. But anyway, that's a complete distraction. Yeah, so, and then after having success with being a bit more intuitive, I found that it almost opened up that ability to be intuitive with the other decks. So yeah, I'm very, very thankful for this deck for opening up sort of more intuitive work. And whilst doing that, I started getting interested in oracle decks as well. I'd like to talk about the Celtic Spirit Oracle, because this deck, I think, was the first deck that I worked with where I realised the power of tarot and oracle cards for them to transport me into like another realm. And so obviously this one feels very ancient and is based on Celtic kind of lore and spirits and sort of deities and, you know, folklore. And I felt that there was something very powerful in this deck, and I'm guessing, you know, maybe because I'm quite artistic and I've been evolving my own other sort of whimsical world to escape to, I realised actually the decks can also help me escape out of the crazy that is the modern world that we live in, particularly in the West, where there's all sorts of just crazy nonsense going on. And so, you know, I think if you're feeling overwhelmed by stuff on the news or just stuff happening in your own town, and you just want to take a step back, and maybe you don't have a natural space for you to go in, I think even just looking at these cards, and I particularly love looking at these cards in the spring in my garden, because then it feels like, you know, it's almost like you get this in surround sound and 3D vision, because you can sort of connect with the beautiful natural pictures on the cards, but also tap into, you know, the natural world around you. And so this is a real kind of headspace escapism deck for me, and it really deepened my practice, because yeah, I think it was the first time that I felt like I was connecting with something more ancient than me, and that, you know, the messages coming through from these cards really were coming from kind of these ancient spirits, and I really valued that, and I hadn't had that experience with, say, more tarot decks. The other thing that deck helped me to do was to do some visual journaling, so taking a card, meditating on it, and then just producing a visual response to it. So I can't actually remember what the card was from this deck, but yeah, so just sort of these visions that came to me after doing a reading with that deck. And you'll see that it's very, there's a running theme of nature here, and then this one here, and so I've been dabbling with that, and I think because I'm a visual person, sometimes I don't remember what I've read. So even if I've done an intuitive reading and I've written some notes down, or I've read the book, even with the best will in the world, I try to remember that information, and I do struggle. And so actually by creating the artwork, So I remember that this was the portal card. And so for me, it was about going through a portal. And again, there's this theme of sort of shadow and the kind of the light through the other side of the portal. So yeah, again, it helps me to connect with the cards on a much deeper level. And so cut to present day. Again, I have found myself turning to the cards for support and guidance. Some of you know that I've been going through a bit of a tower moment in respect of my paid employment, which is being made redundant from a job that I really love, and it's probably the first job, maybe the only job, that I've actually genuinely cared about and felt that it's been a worthwhile meaningful job to go to. And so I've been through a whole range of emotions, from obviously frustration to anger to grief, and the reason I love this job so much is because it's, well, one, it's in a beautiful location and it's working with wonderful people, and the purpose of the job is all around well-being and helping people to have meaning and feel like they have something to offer, and that's probably as much as I can say about the job. And you know, since day one of finding out about this proposal, because we had to go through a consultation process, I turned to the cards to really I don't think reassurance is the word, but just to try and check in with, I guess, intuition and all of that, just to make sense of it, because you know, I've gone through a range of emotions, from obviously anger, frustration, disappointment, and grief, and a lot of sadness. But one of the decks that has really helped me through this, and it's one of my favourite decks anyway, is the Season of the Witch Imbolc edition, which is interesting because obviously it's the right time of year to be using this anyway. But it's, you know, this deck is all about self-care, and because, let me sort these cards out, because, you know, this situation has because this situation has been so emotionally unsettling, this has really been the perfect deck. And actually, even though this has been an unsettling time, these cards have been really reassuring, and the readings that I have done have sort of said, yes, you're going through this tricky situation at the moment, but the brighter times are coming. You know, you just have to keep plodding along, and, you know, something positive is going to come out of this. And, you know, actually I've used several different decks during this period, and they've all had a similar message, and so I'm just going with it, and I'm, you know, trusting what the cards are telling me. I think, you know, when you have these tricky situations, you do need some hope, and these cards have definitely provided me with some hope. And let's talk about milestones then. So for milestones, I've selected Rebecca Campbell's The Starseed Oracle. This is the only deck I have by Rebecca, but I am planning on getting some of her other decks, if not all of them, because I really value her work, and that links into the reason it's a milestone for me. But I should say this doubles up with reading Rebecca's book here, Light is the New Black. And I think if you're kind of in a limbo state where you've got ideas but you don't have the confidence to put them out there, I'd really recommend reading this, because reading this book and using this deck was definitely a milestone for me, because it gave me the confidence to start up this YouTube channel, but also to start kind of letting other people know that I was into tarot. And Rebecca talks about coming out of the spiritual closet, and because there is this stigma, I think people are a little bit wary about fully disclosing that this is something that they do. And after reading this, and I think I heard one of her podcasts, she actually said that, you know, actually the more that you open up to this, the more stuff will come back to you. And you know, I thought on that, and I thought, okay, actually I've got nothing to lose here. So yeah, discovering Rebecca's work through her oracle deck and her books and her podcasts were definitely a milestone. And if I hadn't have started the YouTube channel, then I'm not sure I would have taken my tarot readings as seriously as I do now. And I felt like I knew I wanted to share my love of tarot and oracle decks with people, but I think back then it was maybe more on a superficial level, but by actually going through the process of doing these videos and working with the cards and being a bit more thorough in my journal, I've really come to value having this in my life. And I just wanted to show you, well, I'll show you all some more cards, but I love this card, which is "You Are Not For Everybody." And I don't know, I am quite a sensitive person, and so this process of putting yourself out there on social media is quite a daunting one. And when you're a sensitive person and then, you know, you get dislikes or people unsubscribe from your channel, I try not to take it personally, but there is a part of me that slightly does. And so this card, yeah, I think I need to photocopy it and stick it up somewhere as a reminder that actually that's okay. It's, you know, it doesn't matter. But yeah, this deck is just really sublime in its cosmicness. And I'm a big fan of this deck, and I do find that when I use this deck, it's for bigger kind of decisions or kind of key moments. So I did do this one at, it's kind of the end of last year coming into this year, for some guidance, but I feel like, yeah, I'm due a reading with this deck very soon, particularly when it's time to transition away from this job that I'm losing. And kind of to round things up, so yeah, this year I'm being a lot more thoughtful and purposeful with the decks that I'm using and the decks that I'm sort of putting together. I've also started to work with a group of decks which I've classed as like my spiritual counsel or spiritual guides, which I talked about in my previous video, so I won't go over that again. But to summarise, I've got like a goddess, an angel, some animals, trees and plants, just sort of energies that I can be thinking about to help me navigate whatever stage I'm at, which I found really comforting. And I think that's something I'm going to be doing certainly a sort of quarter by quarter, so kind of seasonal, but I may even do it each month depending on kind of situations. The other thing that I am going to be working on a lot more, for reasons I mentioned earlier, is my visual tarot journal. So yeah, just not every reading, but key readings, or you know, if there's a card that I've pulled which particularly resonates with me, just to sit and meditate a while and create an image based on that card or reading, just to gain extra insight, and as I said, just so I have that visual record of what the card said, because it's, you know, as I say, every picture tells a story, and and this is going to be like a visual diary of my tarot journey, and I have planned to make a separate video on this, so when I do, I will link it up, so you can check that out if you're interested, that is. And I'm also going to keep up with my Rider-Waite-Smith study, so working through the suggested tarot reading activities suggested by Liz Dean in her book Ultimate Guide to Tarot. And I've mentioned this a couple of times on the channel before, but it's just key things, so whether it's colours or numerology or just symbols, really to try and connect with the Rider-Waite-Smith system on a much deeper level, because as I mentioned, I do find all the symbols, it sort of buried in those cards, absolutely fascinating, and I would love to get to a stage where I knew that deck inside out, and I'm definitely not there yet, and I think there's a place definitely for, you know, knowing tarot history, knowing the meanings of the cards, but also working with the cards on a pure intuitive level as well. And so that's sort of my plan now, to have this two-pronged approach with the tarot. So, you know, learning the key meanings, but also kind of tapping into things that stand out to me, and messages that my subconscious want me to know just purely based on the pictures. Let me know if that's something you do as well. As always, thank you so much for joining me today and hanging out to see which tarot decks have helped me along the way with my tarot journey. And thank you to Simon from At the Hermit's Cave for coming up with this really fun hashtag to make a video response to. If you found it interesting today, I'd love it if you gave it a like to let me know that this content is worthwhile and beneficial to you, and it might encourage me to make future video responses. And if you enjoyed it, also consider subscribing to my channel, it really does mean a lot. I'm Sally, and this is my channel, Vaudeville Manor, House of Art and Tarot, and until the next video, here are some other videos that you might like to watch in the meantime. Bye bye.